Dr. Nightechoes. I was 9 years old when the woman first appeared in the corner of my bedroom. She always stood in the pocket of space between my wardrobe and the window. At first, I convinced myself it was just a pile of laundry or a trick of the moonlight on the wallpaper. But as the weeks went by, the shape became too clear to ignore. She was very tall and wore a dress the color of wet bone. Her most unsettling feature was her neck. It was thin and stretched out, making her head sit much higher than a normal person's. She never blinked. She just watched me with a wide, frozen smile that showed too many teeth. In my dreams, she would just stand there, but I always woke up feeling like I was being hunted. One humid night in July, the dream finally stopped being a dream. I woke up because I felt a heavy pressure on the edge of my mattress. The room was silent, but the air felt thick and smelled like old, stagnant water. I looked toward the corner, expecting to see the empty space, but she wasn't there. My heart started thumping against my ribs. I slowly turned my head to the other side of the bed. She was leaning over me. Her long neck was bent at a sharp, unnatural angle so her face could be inches away from mine. Her skin looked like gray wax that had melted and hardened again. The smile was even wider up close. The corners of her mouth reached almost to her ears, and the skin there was cracked and raw. She didn't have any breath, but I could hear a faint, wet, clicking sound coming from her throat. I tried to scream, but my throat felt like it was full of sand. She reached out a long, spindly finger and tucked a lock of hair behind my ear. Her touch was dry and felt like dead leaves. She leaned in even closer until her nose brushed against mine. "I am still here." I blinked, and she began to recede. She didn't move her legs. She just faded backward into the floral wallpaper, her long neck being the last thing to vanish. I sat up and turned on every light in the house, but my parents just told me it was a night terror. I am an adult now, with my own home. Last night, I was tucking my daughter into bed. She looked into the corner of her room and asked me why the tall lady in the white dress was smiling so hard. I haven't slept since. I was 6 years old when the lady started visiting my room. My mom worked the night shift at the hospital to keep us fed. She would kiss me goodbye at 6, lock the front door, and leave me with my books and the television. I was never scared because the lady was always there. She wore a soft, gray dress that made a shushing sound when she walked. She never spoke, but she was very kind. Every night at 9, she would walk into my room and pull the heavy blankets up to my chin. She would sit on the edge of my mattress and pat my leg until I fell asleep. I told my mom about my nice friend, but she just smiled and said I had a wonderful imagination. One Tuesday, my mom came home 3 hours early because the hospital power went out. I was already in bed, drifting off to sleep. I felt the familiar weight of the lady sitting down next to me. The mattress tilted under her heaviness. I felt her cold, smooth hand brush against my forehead. Then, I heard the front door click open and my mom's footsteps in the hallway. My mom called out my name as she walked toward my bedroom. She pushed the door open and flipped the light switch. I blinked at the brightness. My mom stood in the doorway with her car keys still in her hand. Her face went completely gray. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the empty spot on the edge of my bed, right next to my hip. I looked down too. There was a deep, heavy depression in the mattress, exactly where a person would be sitting. We both watched in total silence as the fabric of the sheets slowly began to smooth out. The indentation rose up inch by inch, exactly like someone was standing up from the bed. The pillow next to my head puffed back out, as if a head had just been lifted off it. There was a faint sound of silk rubbing together, and then the room went still. My mom grabbed me and ran out of the house. We stayed at a motel that night. She never let me stay home alone again, even during the day. She told the police someone had broken in, but the locks were still turned, and the windows were bolted shut. I am 30 years old now, but I still can't sleep on a soft mattress. I need to know the bed is flat and empty. Sometimes, when I am almost asleep, I feel the corner of my bed dip down under a heavy weight. I stay perfectly still and keep my eyes closed. I don't want to see who is sitting there. I was 8 years old when I realized the sound in my room wasn't the wind. Every night, as soon as my mom turned off the lamp and closed the door, it would start. It was a heavy, wet sound, coming from behind the white slats of my closet door. It sounded like someone was struggling to take a breath through a mouthful of water. It was rhythmic and slow. Inhale, pause, exhale. It was so loud that I could hear the click of the throat at the end of every breath. I used to pull my heavy quilt over my ears until I was sweating, but the sound always cut right through the fabric. My parents told me it was just the house settling or the heater pipes. They told me closets are just small rooms for clothes. But I knew what a house sounded like, and houses don't rattle when they breathe. One Friday night, I decided I couldn't live with the fear anymore. The breathing was especially loud that night. It sounded angry and ragged. I grabbed my plastic flashlight and crawled to the edge of my bed. My heart was thumping so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I reached out, grabbed the cold metal handle, and yanked the closet door open as hard as I could. I shined the light inside. It was just my school shoes, my winter coat, and a box of old blocks. The space was completely empty, but the breathing didn't stop. In fact, it got louder. I stood there, trembling, looking at the empty floor of the closet. Then I realized the sound wasn't coming from behind the coats anymore. It had moved. The heavy, labored rattling was now coming from the empty air exactly 3 inches in front of my nose. I could feel the faint, cold puff of a stranger's exhale hitting my cheeks. It smelled like wet dirt and old copper. I stood frozen as the invisible lungs filled up again. The sound was so close it felt like it was inside my own head. I dropped the flashlight and ran for my parents' room. I never slept in that bedroom again. We moved out a year later, but I still can't stand total silence. Even now, as a grown man, I have to sleep with a loud fan running. If the room gets too quiet, I start to hear that wet, clicking rattle starting up right next to my ear. I know it followed me. It is just waiting for the noise to stop. I was 6 years old when I stopped letting my feet hang over the edge of the mattress. It was a humid night, and my bedroom window was open just a crack. I was lying on my stomach, trying to find a cool spot on the pillow. My right leg had slipped out from under the duvet. My ankle was resting just past the wooden frame of the bed. I felt a sudden, sharp pressure. It wasn't a poke or a brush. It was a firm, heavy grip. A hand had reached out from the darkness beneath my bed and clamped onto my leg. The skin of the hand felt cold and dry, like an old leather glove that had been left in the rain. The fingers were long and felt thin, as if there was no meat on the bones. I tried to pull my leg back, but the grip was solid. It felt like an anchor pulling me toward the floor. I let out a scream that felt like it tore my throat. I kicked wildly with my other foot until the pressure finally snapped away. I heard a soft, wet, sliding sound from under the bed, like a heavy coat being dragged across the floorboards. My dad came bursting into the room a few seconds later. He flipped the light switch and knelt down immediately. He lifted the edge of the blue bedspread and looked underneath. He told me there was nothing there but a few dusty toy cars and a lost sock. He stayed with me for a minute to calm me down. He told me it was just a bad dream and that the house was safe. He sat on the edge of the bed and tucked the covers tightly around my feet. He reached down to adjust my pajama pant leg, and then he stopped moving. His face went very pale under the yellow light of the lamp. He was looking at my right ankle. Wrapped clearly around the bone were 4 long, dark, red marks. They looked like deep bruises from fingers. They were spaced too far apart to be human. My dad didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared at the marks and then looked back at the dark gap under the bed. He didn't leave my room that night. I am 30 now, and those marks never fully faded. They are faint, but when the weather gets cold, the skin there turns a bruised purple. I still sleep with my mattress directly on the floor. I can't have a gap beneath me. I was 5 years old when I met Mr. Red. He lived in the corners of the house where the light didn't reach. My parents used to laugh when they saw me sharing my juice with the empty air. They thought it was a phase. They asked me what he looked like, and I told them he was very thin and didn't have any skin. I told them his name was Mr. Red because he was the color of a raw steak. They thought I was just being a creative child. They didn't see him crouching behind the sofa with his long, wet fingers tucked into his mouth. He didn't speak with words. He made a sound like a dry leaf skittering across the floor. He used to follow me into the kitchen and point at the big silver oven. He liked to press his face against the glass door. One night, I woke up because I felt a cold draft in my room. Mr. Red was standing by my bed. He looked very small and tight, like he was shivering. He kept pointing toward the kitchen. I followed him down the dark hallway. The linoleum floor was freezing on my bare feet. He led me to the oven and tapped on the metal. He looked at me with his large, milky eyes and climbed inside. My dad found me at midnight, standing in front of the stove. I had my hand on the big black dial. The kitchen was pitch black except for the little red light on the clock. My dad asked me what I was doing. I told him that Mr. Red was cold. I told him that he was hiding in the back of the oven, right behind the metal racks. I said he wanted me to turn it on high so he could finally stay warm. My dad's face went completely white. He grabbed me and pulled me away. But before he turned me around, I saw a long, red finger poke out from the vent at the back of the stove. My parents had the oven hauled away the next morning. They bought a new one, but I never played in the kitchen again. I am an adult now, and I have a house of my own. I never use the oven. I keep it taped shut. Sometimes, when I am sitting in the living room, I hear a faint tapping sound coming from the kitchen. It sounds like a fingernail hitting a metal rack. I know he is still cold. I know he is still waiting for me to turn the dial. I was 7 years old when the air conditioning vent in my bedroom started talking to me. It sat high up on the wall, a rectangular metal grate covered in layers of white paint. Every night after the house went quiet, the fan would kick on with a low hum. That was when the voice started. It was a thin, raspy sound that came through the slats. It sounded exactly like my grandmother. She had passed away when I was 2, but I remembered her voice from old home movies. It was a slow, shaky whisper that always smelled like mothballs and peppermint. She didn't tell me she loved me or that she missed me. She only told me what was coming. She would whisper my name 3 times, and then she would give me the news for the next day. One night, the vent whispered that my teacher would trip on a red rug. The next morning at school, Mrs. Gable fell flat on her face in the library. Another night, the voice told me that the neighbor's golden retriever would run away at noon. At exactly 12 o'clock the next day, I watched through the fence as the dog squeezed through a gap in the wood and vanished. I tried to tell my parents, but they told me it was just the air rushing through the metal ducts. They said the house was old and the pipes made strange noises, but the noises were never wrong. The voice became a part of my life. I started to rely on it. I would press my ear against the cold metal and wait for the vibration. I liked knowing the future. It made me feel safe. That changed on a Sunday night in October. The air was cold and the heater was blowing hard. The voice was louder than usual. It didn't whisper a secret about school or the neighbors. It just said, "Don't go into the kitchen tomorrow morning." I asked why, but the vent went silent. The next morning, I forgot. I walked into the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal. I saw my father standing by the stove. He looked normal, but he was holding a large knife and staring at the wall. He didn't turn around when I entered. He just started sobbing in a way that didn't sound human. I ran back to my room and locked the door. I am an adult now, and I never have the air conditioning on. I prefer to sweat. I am too afraid of what the wind might tell me next. I was 7 years old when the dog appeared. It didn't arrive with a sound or a movement. I simply woke up at 3 in the morning and saw it sitting at the foot of my bed. It was massive. Its head was level with mine, even though it was sitting on the floor. It was darker than the rest of the room, like someone had cut a hole out of the night in the shape of a beast. The most unsettling part was its eyes. They weren't glowing, but they were a deep, flat red, like the color of an old scab. The room was normally quiet, but now it was filled with the sound of its breathing. It didn't growl or bark, it just panted. It was a heavy, wet sound. Huff, huff, huff. I could see its ribcage moving under the black fuzz of its coat. It looked like a real animal, but it didn't have a smell. Usually a dog that size would smell like fur or dirt, but the air around it just felt thin and empty. I sat up slowly, clutching my blanket to my chest. The dog didn't move. It just kept staring at me with those flat red eyes, its tongue hanging out of the side of its mouth. I wanted to know if it was real. I reached out a trembling hand toward its head. I thought I would feel coarse hair or a warm forehead. Instead, my fingers passed right through its skull. There was no resistance at all. It felt like sticking my hand into a thick cloud of dry ice. As soon as my skin touched the shadow, the temperature in the room dropped 30 degrees. I could see my own breath puffing out in white clouds. My hand went numb instantly, and the cold traveled up my arm and settled deep in my chest. The dog didn't flinch. It just kept up that steady, rhythmic panting. I pulled my hand back and tucked it under my armpit to warm it, but the chill stayed in my bones. I watched it until the sun started to come up. As the first light hit the floor, the dog didn't run away. It just got thinner and thinner until it looked like a smudge of smoke, and then it was gone. I told my mom, but she said I probably just saw the shadow of the maple tree outside. I am a grown man now, but I still can't keep a dog in the house. Every night, I wake up at 3 a.m. and feel a sudden, sharp cold at the end of my bed. I can hear that wet panting in the dark, and I know it's just waiting for me to reach out again. I was 10 years old when I stopped trusting mirrors. It happened one Saturday morning. I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth. It was a normal morning. The sun was bright through the window, and I was humming a song. I had a new toothbrush, a blue one. I remember looking at my reflection in the big mirror over the sink. I lifted my arm to brush my back teeth. My reflection did not move. It just stood there, perfectly still. My arm was up, but its arm was down. I stopped brushing. My reflection kept staring straight ahead. Its eyes were fixed on mine. There was no movement in its chest, no flicker in its gaze. Its mouth was closed, even though mine was open around the toothbrush. My reflection's face looked exactly like mine, but the expression was wrong. It wasn't just blank, it was cold. It held a look of pure, deep hatred, like it was disgusted by me. A shiver went through me. I slowly lowered my arm. My reflection didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Its eyes were dark. My own reflection was staring at me like I was a stranger. I tried to lift my other hand to wave. My hand went up. Its hand stayed down. It was a completely separate person trapped behind the glass. I dropped my toothbrush. It clattered loudly in the sink. My reflection didn't flinch. It just kept that look of intense dislike on its face. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. I slowly turned my head to the side, away from the mirror. I could feel its eyes burning into the back of my head. I could feel its gaze following my movement. I counted to 3 in my head, then I spun back around to face the mirror. It was gone. My own reflection was back. It was brushing its teeth, mimicking me perfectly. Its face held a confused, innocent look, like it didn't know what had just happened. But I knew. I had seen it. I had seen what was truly behind the glass. I bolted out of the bathroom and didn't look in a mirror for 3 years after that day. Even now, as an adult, I always look away when I pass a mirror quickly. I don't want to catch it unawares again. I don't want to see that hatred. I was 8 years old when my sister, Sarah, stopped being Sarah for a few minutes. It was a rainy Saturday, and the house felt small and cramped. We decided to play hide and seek to pass the time. It was my turn to seek. I finished counting to 50 in the hallway and opened my eyes. I heard the distinct sound of bare feet slapping against the linoleum in the kitchen. I turned the corner just in time to see the hem of her blue nightgown disappear into the laundry room. The laundry room was at the end of a short, dead-end hall. It was a tiny space with a concrete floor, a washer, a dryer, and a single light bulb hanging from a wire. There were no windows and no other doors. If you went in, the only way out was past me. I laughed and ran toward the door, yelling that I had found her. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, ready to pull her out from behind the dryer. The room was empty. The washer was humming quietly, and the dryer was cold. I checked behind the baskets and under the ironing board. I even looked inside the washer, which was a stupid thing to do, but I was confused. There was nowhere for a 10-year-old girl to go. I stood in the center of that small room for a long time, listening to the silence. I felt a cold chill settle in the pit of my stomach. I called her name, but no one answered. I checked the hallway, thinking she had somehow slipped past me, but the floorboards didn't creak. 5 minutes later, the heavy front door opened. Sarah walked into the house, soaked to the bone from the rain. She was carrying a handful of wet stones from the driveway. I asked her how she got out there. She looked at me like I was crazy and said she had been outside since the game started because she thought it would be a better hiding spot. I told her I saw her run into the laundry room. She just shook her head and went upstairs to change. I went back to the laundry room and looked at the floor. Right in the middle of the concrete, where I had been standing, was a single wet footprint. It was the shape of a foot, but it didn't have any toes. I'm 30 now, and I still don't like being in rooms with only one exit. I keep thinking about that blue nightgown and wondering what exactly I followed into the dark.